Imagine living in a city where body parts keep appearing in empty fields, riverbanks, and railroad yards. A city where the killer isn't just murdering people, he's cutting them apart, removing their heads, and leaving investigators with almost nothing to identify the victims. And perhaps most terrifying of all, a city where even one of America's most famous lawmen can't stop the slaughter. This is the story of the Kingsbury Run murders, also known as the Cleveland Torso murders. And to this day, the killer's identity remains one of America's greatest unsolved mysteries. Before we begin, make sure to like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments who you think was responsible for these horrific crimes. Now let's step back to Cleveland, Ohio, in the middle of the Great Depression. The 1930s were a difficult time for many Americans. Jobs were scarce, families struggled to survive, and thousands of homeless people lived in makeshift camps scattered throughout the city. One of these areas was known as Kingsbury Run. Kingsbury Run was a sprawling network of shantytowns, railroad tracks, abandoned buildings, and makeshift shelters. It was home to drifters, laborers, and people who had nowhere else to go. It was also the perfect hunting ground for a killer. On September 23, 1935, two teenage boys made a horrifying discovery. Near the shores of Lake Erie, they found the body of a man, or rather, what was left of him. The victim had been decapitated. His head was missing. His body showed signs of careful dismemberment. Investigators would later identify him as 28-year-old Edward Andraschi. Just a short distance away, police found the remains of another victim. The second victim would never be identified. The newspapers exploded with coverage. Cleveland had never seen anything like it. But what nobody knew at the time was that these were only the first victims. Over the next several years, bodies would continue to appear throughout Cleveland. Some victims were found in open fields. Others were hidden beneath bridges. Several were discovered near Kingsbury Run itself. Nearly all shared the same horrifying characteristics. Their heads had been removed. Their bodies had been mutilated. Many had been cut apart with remarkable precision. Investigators began to believe the killer possessed medical knowledge or experience with butchering animals. As the death toll grew, fear spread throughout the city. Who was this monster? How was he finding his victims? And why couldn't anyone stop him? By 1936, the murders had become impossible to ignore. That year brought one of the most disturbing discoveries yet. Two boys playing near Kingsbury Run found the upper half of a woman's torso. The lower half was missing. Her head was gone. Authorities later identified her as Florence Polillo. She had been missing for months. The killer appeared to be growing bolder. Even more frightening, some evidence suggested that certain victims may have still been alive when parts of their bodies were removed. The possibility horrified investigators. Newspapers gave the killer a terrifying nickname, the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run. As public pressure mounted, city officials turned to one of the most famous crime fighters in America. His name was Eliot Ness. If that name sounds familiar, it should. Ness became famous for helping bring down notorious gangster Al Capone. During the Prohibition, he was viewed as a hero, a man who could solve impossible cases. But the Mad Butcher would prove to be his greatest challenge. Ness assembled a large task force. Investigators interviewed witnesses. They searched homeless camps. They questioned doctors, butchers, and anyone who might possess anatomical knowledge. Thousands of leads poured in. None led to the killer. Meanwhile, the murders continued. Each new discovery intensified public panic. Parents feared letting children play outside. Residents locked their doors earlier than ever. The city felt haunted. One of the most bizarre twists came in 1938. A woman discovered the remains of a victim hidden beneath a bridge. Nearby was another body. Again, both victims had been decapitated. The killer seemed almost untouchable. Some investigators began to suspect that the murderer was taunting police. Body parts often appeared in highly visible locations. It was as if the killer wanted to ensure they would be found. As pressure mounted, Eliot Ness made a controversial decision. He ordered the destruction of the shanty towns in Kingsbury Run. Authorities raided the camps, structures were burned, hundreds of homeless residents were forced to leave. Ness believed the killer was hiding among them or using the area as a hunting ground. The move generated enormous controversy. Some praised Ness for taking decisive action. Others argued he was targeting vulnerable people instead of catching the murderer. Yet, strangely, after the destruction of the camps, the murders appeared to stop. Or at least they stopped in Cleveland, but that didn't mean the mystery was solved. In fact, the most chilling questions were still unanswered. Who was the Mad Butcher? Over the decades, countless suspects have been proposed. One of the most famous was a doctor named Francis Sweeney. Sweeney had medical training. He struggled with severe alcoholism and mental health problems. Some investigators believed he possessed the skills necessary to commit the murders. Eliot Ness reportedly considered Sweeney his strongest suspect. According to some accounts, Sweeney even failed early lie detector examinations. But there was a problem: there wasn't enough evidence to arrest him. No physical evidence tied him to the crimes. No witnesses could place him at the scenes. No confession ever came. Eventually, Sweeney entered a mental institution. The case remained unsolved. Other suspects emerged over the years. Some believed the killer was a traveling butcher. Others thought he was a railroad worker moving through different cities. There were even theories connecting the murders to other unsolved killings across the United States. But none of these theories could be proven. Officially, the case remains open. The true number of victims is also debated. While authorities officially recognize 12 victims, some researchers believe the actual number may have been significantly higher. Many victims were never identified. Some may never have been reported missing. The transient nature of Kingsbury Run made tracking victims incredibly difficult. Forensic science in the 1930s was far less advanced than it is today. DNA testing didn't exist. Fingerprint databases were limited. Investigators often relied on witness, testimony, and physical evidence alone. If the Mad Butcher were active today, modern forensic technology might have identified him quickly. But in the 1930s, he vanished into history. Nearly a century later, the Kingsbury Run murders continue to fascinate criminologists, historians, and true crime enthusiasts. The case has inspired books, documentaries, and endless debates. Many consider it America's equivalent of Jack the Ripper. Both killers targeted vulnerable victims. Both mutilated bodies, and both disappeared without ever facing justice. Somewhere in Cleveland's past lies the truth. Perhaps the Mad Butcher was Francis Sweeney. Perhaps it was someone entirely different. Maybe the answer died with the killer himself. What we do know is that between 1935 and 1938, a predator stalked the forgotten corners of Cleveland. He left behind a trail of horror. He humiliated investigators. He challenged one of America's most famous lawmen. And then he vanished, leaving behind one of the darkest mysteries in American criminal history. The question remains, who was the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run? And will we ever know the truth? If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of mystery's most disturbing unsolved cases, don't forget to subscribe to The Velvet Grave for more true crime stories that refuse to stay buried. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.